You won't believe what happened when my son was just trying to eat a meal in his own kitchen. It all started on a quiet afternoon when this woman, who didn't even live in our house, showed up uninvited. She wasn't just any neighbor, she was the kind of person who makes you feel uncomfortable the moment she walks in. Without any warning, she began accusing my son of something he didn't do. And all because of the color of his skin. It was shocking, hurtful, and honestly hard to believe. Imagine just sitting down to eat in your own home, and suddenly someone calls 911 on you. That's exactly what happened. This woman crossed every line, trespassing into our space, making false claims and stirring up unnecessary trouble. The tension in the house grew thick as the police were called, not because of any real problem, but because of her prejudice. My son was confused, scared, and feeling targeted in a place where he should have felt safest. This story isn't just about one incident. It's about the bigger issue of racial bias and how it shows up in the most unexpected places, sometimes even right inside your own home. It's about how a simple moment, like eating a meal, can turn into something painful when people jump to the wrong conclusions based on skin color. As the situation escalated, things got more complicated. The woman refused to leave, even though she had no right to be there, and the police had to step in to sort out the mess. But what happened next? How did this all end? You'll have to keep watching to hear the full story. This isn't just about my family, it's about standing up against unfairness and making sure no one else has to go through something like this. What makes this situation even more frustrating is knowing how long we've lived in this neighborhood. My son has grown up here. This house has always been his safe space. We've been careful, respectful neighbors, never causing any trouble. So when this woman showed up, it felt like a punch to the gut. She acted like she owned the place, like my son didn't belong here at all. It wasn't just about one meal or one day. 'Twas a clash of assumptions and biases that ran deeper than I expected. The tension didn't just come from her words or actions, it was the way she looked at him, as if he was a stranger or a threat just for being who he is. And that's what made this whole thing so painful. It's one thing to hear about racism in the news, but it's another when it hits so close to home. My son is just trying to live his life, and suddenly he's being judged unfairly in his own kitchen. It's hard to explain how that feels, but it's a mix of anger, sadness, and disbelief. I wish I could say this was an isolated event, but unfortunately, it's not. Stories like this happen too often, people making assumptions and calling the authorities on others without cause. It's a reality many families face daily. And when those assumptions come from someone who doesn't even belong on your property, it makes you question what safety really means. As the police arrived and tried to figure out what was going on, the situation got even more confusing. The woman insisted she was right, but the facts told a different story. My son stayed calm, but you could see the frustration building in his eyes. What would happen next? Would justice be served? Or would this misunderstanding turn into something worse? There's more to this story, and it's far from over. What makes this situation even more frustrating is knowing how long we've lived in this neighborhood. My son has grown up here. This house has always been his safe space. We've been careful, respectful neighbors, never causing any trouble. So when this woman showed up, it felt like a punch to the gut. She acted like she owned the place, like my son didn't belong here at all. It wasn't just about one meal or one day. 'Twas a clash of assumptions and biases that ran deeper than I expected. The tension didn't just come from her words or actions, it was the way she looked at him, as if he was a stranger or a threat just for being who he is. And that's what made this whole thing so painful. It's one thing to hear about racism in the news, but it's another when it hits so close to home. My son is just trying to live his life, and suddenly he's being judged unfairly in his own kitchen. It's hard to explain how that feels, but it's a mix of anger, sadness, and disbelief. I wish I could say this was an isolated event, but unfortunately, it's not. Stories like this happen too often, people making assumptions and calling the authorities on others without cause. It's a reality many families face daily. And when those assumptions come from someone who doesn't even belong on your property, it makes you question what safety really means. As the police arrived and tried to figure out what was going on, the situation got even more confusing. The woman insisted she was right, but the facts told a different story. My son stayed calm, but you could see the frustration building in his eyes. What would happen next? Would justice be served? Or would this misunderstanding turn into something worse? There's more to this story, and it's far from over. As the police officer stepped inside, the tension in the room was almost unbearable. They looked between my son and the woman who had called them, trying to piece together what had actually happened. My son explained calmly that he was simply eating in his own kitchen, a place he's lived in his whole life. But the woman kept insisting she was concerned, repeating her story about feeling unsafe. It was clear that she wasn't just worried. Her words carried a tone that felt judgmental and unfair, like she was convinced my son didn't belong there. Meanwhile, I watched from the doorway, feeling a mixture of anger and helplessness. How could someone so easily make false assumptions based on skin color? How often had this happened to my son before? The situation wasn't just about one woman's misunderstanding anymore. It was about the wider issue of racial bias and how it affects everyday life. The officers tried to stay neutral, but I could tell they were struggling to untangle the truth from the emotions in the room. At the same time, I couldn't help but think about the neighborhood around us. How many others had silently judged my family without really knowing us? How many times had these kinds of encounters gone unspoken, leaving people hurt and unheard? There was a bigger story here, one about community, respect, and the invisible walls that sometimes divide us. As the conversation continued, another twist emerged. A neighbor who had heard the commotion came outside to see what was going on. Their perspective added a new layer to the situation, bringing up questions about how rumors and assumptions spread quickly, often without facts. The atmosphere was charged, and it was clear this wasn't just about one kitchen or one meal anymore. The conflict was far from over. Every word, every glance, seemed to build toward something bigger. What would happen next? Would justice find its way through the confusion? Or was this just the beginning of a much longer fight? The story was still unfolding, and the outcome remained uncertain. The tension in the room grew heavier by the minute. The woman, still standing defiantly in the doorway, refused to back down. She kept repeating her accusations, her voice growing louder, drawing more attention from neighbors who had started gathering outside. My son stayed calm, but I could see the strain on his face, the exhaustion of being misunderstood and judged unfairly in a place that should be his sanctuary. The police officers looked between us all, caught in the middle of a situation that was spiraling out of control. Suddenly, the neighbor who had come out earlier stepped forward, trying to calm things down. But instead of easing the tension, their words only added fuel to the fire. They questioned the woman's right to be on the property, pointing out that she was trespassing and had no reason to be there. That sparked an argument that felt like it could explode at any moment. Voices raised, and the atmosphere was thick with frustration and disbelief. As more neighbors peeked out of their windows, the feeling of being watched made everything feel even more intense. It was no longer just about a simple misunderstanding. It was about respect, fairness, and standing up against prejudice. My son's silence spoke volumes, his eyes searching for support and justice amid the chaos. The woman's refusal to leave made it clear she wasn't going anywhere without a fight. The officers tried to regain control, asking for calm and order, but the crowd's presence only made the situation feel more volatile. It was like walking on a tightrope with one wrong move threatening to set everything off. The question hanging in the air was clear. Would this end peacefully, or was it about to escalate into something much worse? Every moment felt heavier, every glance sharper. The conflict wasn't just between individuals anymore, it was a showdown that touched on deeper issues of trust, safety, and belonging. And as the standoff continued, the answer to what would happen next remained just out of reach. Just when it seemed like things couldn't get any more tense, a sudden knock came at the front door, another unexpected visitor. It was someone none of us were prepared for. The landlord. He arrived after hearing about the disturbance, and his presence instantly shifted the atmosphere. The woman's confident stance wavered for a moment, and my son's eyes flickered with hope. But instead of calming the situation, his arrival only added a new layer of complexity. The landlord didn't immediately take sides. Instead, he began questioning the woman, asking why she was on the property without permission. As she tried to defend herself, it became clear she had no legitimate reason to be there at all. Yet, she doubled down on her claims, insisting she was protecting the neighborhood. That phrase hung in the air, protecting the neighborhood, and it felt like a mask for something deeper. A justification rooted in suspicion rather than fact. Then the landlord dropped an unexpected bombshell. He revealed that the woman had a history of similar complaints against other neighbors, many of which were dismissed as unfounded or exaggerated. This wasn't just an isolated incident, but part of a pattern of behavior that had been quietly tolerated until now. The realization hit hard. This wasn't just about my son eating in his own kitchen. It was about a larger problem brewing under the surface, one that affected the entire community at that moment. The woman's tone shifted from defensive to aggressive. She accused us of making a scene and threatened to call the police again, this time insisting the situation was out of control. The officers, already on edge, exchanged worried glances. The crowd outside grew restless, sensing the stakes were rising. Everything was spiraling faster than anyone expected. The question now wasn't just who was right or wrong, it was whether the situation could be contained before it blew up completely. And as everyone waited for the next move, one thing was clear. This story was far from over. Just when it felt like the situation might spiral completely out of control, the lead officer stepped forward with a calm but firm voice. He had listened closely to every side: the woman's accusations, my son's explanation, and the landlord's revealing comments. After a moment of silence, he made it clear. The woman had no legal right to be on the property and was trespassing. Her calls to 911 were based on assumptions, not facts. The officers reminded her that making false reports wastes valuable resources and can have serious consequences. The woman's face flushed with anger, but she realized there was no backing down. The officers politely asked her to leave, and after a tense pause, she finally walked away. As the door closed behind her, a wave of relief washed over us. My son looked exhausted, but grateful, his dignity restored in front of the neighbors who had gathered. Watching the whole ordeal unfold, just as we thought things were settling, the landlord stepped closer, turning to me quietly. He admitted that he had been hesitant to confront the woman before because of the tension she brought to the neighborhood. But witnessing the events that day made him promise to take a stronger stand against any future harassment. It felt like a small victory for our family and the community, a sign that change was possible when people speak up. But then came the unexpected twist. As the officers prepared to leave, they mentioned they would be reviewing security footage from nearby cameras. Moments later, one of the neighbors pulled me aside and showed me a video on their phone. It captured something startling. Before she even stepped onto our property, the woman had been seen speaking with someone else on the phone, laughing. It suggested that this incident might have been planned or at least encouraged by someone else. The relief was mixed with confusion and a new kind of worry. Who was behind this? Why target my family? The story wasn't over, not by a long shot. After seeing the video, I knew this was more than just a random act. It was targeted, intentional, and meant to cause harm. But instead of feeling defeated, my family and I chose to stand stronger than ever. We reported the footage to the police, who promised to investigate further. It was a relief to know that the truth was finally coming to light, and that those responsible would be held accountable. In the days that followed, the neighborhood began to shift. Many neighbors reached out to show support, sharing their own stories of unfair treatment or expressing outrage over what happened. It became clear that this wasn't just my family's battle, it was a wake-up call for the entire community. Conversations started happening about respect, understanding, and the importance of standing up against racism and prejudice in all its forms. My son slowly regained his peace of mind. Knowing that people had his back made a huge difference. The kitchen, once a place of unexpected pain, became a symbol of resilience. We all realized that home is more than just walls. It's about safety, acceptance, and love. Looking back, this experience taught us a lot. It showed how quickly assumptions can hurt and how important it is to speak up when something feels wrong. It reminded us that change begins when we confront injustice, even when it's uncomfortable. Most of all, it showed the power of community to come together and support one another in the face of unfairness. This story isn't just about one racist incident or a woman trespassing. It's about hope, courage, and standing tall when the world tries to knock you down. And while there's still work to be done, we are ready to keep moving forward. Thank you for listening and standing with us.